You're listening to Accents, a radio show for literature, art, and culture. I'm your host, Katerina Stoikova, and my guest today is poet Nancy Chen Long. Hi, Nancy, how are you?
Hi, Katerina. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Nancy, this is your first time on Accents. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm glad to be here.
I've wanted to interview you since we were classmates, in the same workshop at Spalding, and I was so impressed with your poems. I fell in love with your poetry right then and there, and I guess it took years to get to the point that we're talking right now, and I feel very excited. It's a journey, right? Nancy Chen Long.
Well, I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah. Nancy Chen Long is the author of Wider Than the Sky, Diode Editions 2020. This is her new book, which was selected for the Diode Editions Book Award, and Light into Bodies, that was published by University of Tampa Press in 2017, which won the Tampa Press Prize for Poetry. Her work has been supported by a National Endowment of the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship and the Poetry Society of America Robert H. Winner Award. You will find her recent poems in Coppernickel, the Cincinnati Review, the Southern Review, and elsewhere. She works at Indiana University in the Research Technologies Division. I would like to start the conversation with you telling us, what are you writing currently?
Currently, I'm writing a manuscript. Well, up until very recently, I was writing a manuscript that explored vision as a generative process. And as someone who has a hard time seeing, I'm interested in how what we see differs from person to person, and how seeing affects our identities, both collectively and individually. And so a number of the poems that I was writing were ekphrastic. They were responding to pieces of art. And then recently, Patty Payne, who is the editor-in-chief of Diode Editions, she also does art, and she has a collection of what she calls Rect Archive, where she takes negatives of old photographs and then she puts them through a process to make other works of art. And on Instagram, she has a number, she keeps adding every day, of images that she's converted from a negative that was ruined. She does a two-way process. One, she turns it into an abstract image, and the other, she restores the image. Well, I started looking at her Rect Archive, which is the one that she makes surreal or abstract. And so I've got probably by now 15 poems where I'm writing in response to that. And I find it interesting. My father passed away in September, and I've only been able to journal about it or write notes. And I haven't really been able to do much with it. He told me a family secret at the time. It's one of those dramatic things you see on TV, a deathbed secret. And I didn't know how to process it. And then when I saw Patty's images, they just came out. But it's coming out in a surreal, oblique way. I'm not talking about anything directly, but her images, well, they're amazing. So if you get a chance to go to Instagram and look at Rect Archive, you'll see what I mean. But anyway, so my poems now, all of them so far recently, have been in response to those particular images.
Sounds like you may already have a chapbook.
Could be. It could be. I have no idea what I'm going to do with these, but yeah, it's. I'm grateful for those images, definitely.
Well, Patty Payne, amazing poet, by the way. She's also the editor and publisher of your latest book, Wider Than the Sky. Can you tell us about that book?
Sure. Wider Than the Sky is explores the porous and slippery nature of memory and mind, especially its recursive and sometimes surreal qualities. Like, for example, how one memory can spawn another memory and then jump to an even another memory, and all of them are connected by the thinnest wisp. It also talks about breaches in memory, gaps and holes, even erasures and disappearance. The book's title, Wider Than the Sky, is taken from an Emily Dickinson poem. Her poem, the first line of which is, "The brain is wider than the sky." Also, the Dickinson poem forms the scaffolding of the book. The book is divided into 3 sections, and each section opens up with a poem titled, "Your brain does not contain memories, it is memories." And each of those poems with the same title is a golden shovel poem of Emily Dickinson's "The Brain is Wider Than the Sky" poem. And with the golden shovel poem, it takes the words of a particular poem, in this case, Dickinson's poem, and for the last word in each line, it uses her particular, it uses the words in her poem in sequence. So if you were to read the last line of the last word of each line of those 3 poems, you get the whole entire Emily Dickinson poem. Anyway, so the Dickinson poem is a golden shovel of it. It forms the basis of the book and forms the content and provides the title. And the book itself is also a meditation on memory, touching on the familial, generational, and epigenetic aspects of it.
Would you kindly read us from this book?
Sure, I'll read a couple of poems for you. I'll show you the cover first. Wider Than the Sky.
Lovely.
Diode Editions does a fantastic, they do fantastic work, and I'm really grateful to be able to work with them. The first poem is a combination of a memory and a dream state, and it's called Altered State at the Grocery Store. By myself at that late hour, I study the uniformed rows, months and months of potential meals boxed and lining the freezer. I fling open the glass door. It's not only the burst of cold that is so startling, but a kiss, warm at the nape that makes me flush, and 2 arms around my waist pulling me in against the sleepy memory of one man's body. There's no time to be afraid. The best way to remember is to forget. Glancing over my shoulder, I recognize the familiar outline of a face, a quirky grin. Pressed against him, my back is warm and my face cold, too close to the frozen door. He hugs me tight. I feel a rhythmic thud, the battering knot of his heart. There are no fires to winnow, he says, as if he has been gone a while, which startles me awake. The bedroom window is wide open. Winter washes over me, frost on the glass pane. The next poem I'd like to read is the third of those poems that's called Your Brain Doesn't Contain Memories, It Is Memories. The one that I mentioned is a golden shovel of Emily Dickinson's poem. I'll read the last word of each line in this particular poem. The brain is just the weight of God, for heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do, as syllable from sound. So the last word in each line forms the last stanza of Emily Dickinson's poem. And that's what I mean by a golden shovel. It's a form that Terence Hayes, wonderful poet Terence Hayes, created. Your brain doesn't contain memories. It is memories. If light is to the eye as language is to the mind, then memories are stories written upon the brain. And to be written upon is to be forever changed. Why is it so difficult for me to learn to see? Just a slip of evening light can transform the willow tree outside my kitchen window. The weight of a million memories bends the tree's supple branches of this, I am certain, into the silhouette of my mother. She is singing God Forgets Our Sins as she tends the garden, pulling weeds, tilling forgiveness into the soil, kneading the clay earth, the heft of it in her hands, like a god fashioning a sinless child. Count them, the ways a parent can love a child encased in a 3-pound mound of gray matter. I am a memory seed, scattered, destined for trial and error. Shall I grow into oleander? It would require a pound of my flesh, or into useful maple, my utility in shade and sweet. Of this I am never certain. Those who know no different, can they remain blameless? After all, a child begins by imitating her parents. They will seem to her as gods. Her sight will be hers only when she can detect a difference between air and water, between breathing and swallowing. It's as if hers and theirs are inseparable. Parents. They have no choice but to pass on what is encoded. The child's brain will do its part, processing the stimulus in harmony with its programming. As the child grows, she embraces the scorched language of her family. Each syllable must be swallowed, no matter what, even if no one is breathing. From the hollow of a willow, a lullaby echoes. It's recorded in my DNA, that sound. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Really appreciate it. How long did you work on that book?
About 4 years. My first book took 5 years. It came out of my creative thesis from Spalding, and I worked on it quite a bit. It took 3 years to get published. Each year was a major revision, and each time I would send it out, it would get some minor tweaks. It took a long time, and it was 3 years is not really that long, but it felt like a long time. It was stressful and very costly. And I started writing this book, but I didn't know it was this book, probably about 5 years ago. And I thought it was about other things. When I first started, I thought it was about naming. And then I thought, and someone suggested I should write about the body. And I found I couldn't write poems on command like that. But I found the poems that I were writing, they tended to be about memory and story and how the brain seems to be wired for narrative. Memory and identity. And so one day I was disgusted with myself on why I could not write what I wanted to write. And I took a survey of my poems and found I had about 3/4 of a book on memory and something related to that, and story and narrative, and the mind and the brain. And so that's when I started flushing it out and finishing this book. So it took about 4 years to write, but it was very fast in publication. So while the first book took 3 years, this one didn't take so long. It took about 4 weeks, actually, but it was at a time when my father was in hospice, and I thought I should send the book out, the manuscript out, but I wasn't really paying much attention to it because my father was in the nursing home and we were doing end-of-life things, taking care of business that way, and so I wasn't paying. My heart wasn't in it, Katerina. So I sent it out a couple of places and just thought I would be, just do my job, send it out. And 4 weeks later, Patty sends an email back and said that it was selected. And I was extremely grateful. But it was shorter than the first one, which was terrible. The process is not a good one.
Well, for our listeners, that almost never happens. You just send something and 4 weeks later you win an award. Mm-hmm. So that is a real testament to the quality of your work.
Thank you, Katerina. It might have something to do with the fact that I was, it's like the tighter and tighter you hold on to something, the harder it is, I guess, or the more you want something. The first book, I really wanted to get it published. The second book, I did, but I wasn't thinking about it. It was, of course, I was thinking about my father. And then 2 weeks after the acceptance, he passed. So it was a very intense time for me.
So the process was different, but how different are the books from one another?
That's a good question, Katerina. The first one is more autobiographical. Someone once said first books tend to be more that way. Mm-hmm. And by autobiographical, I mean in a broad sense. So I know you understand this as a poet. It's the poetic eye is not necessarily always me. And when I say you, it's not necessarily someone else, or it is. So it's a slippery area there, but it tends to be more autobiographical. And the second book, while it's based on memory, it has a different feel to it. So I would say they're 40% similar, maybe, if I was to quantify it. If that makes sense. I don't know if you quantify such a thing, but if I
No,
were.
I love that you put percentage to it. That's exactly what I would do. That's exactly what a technical person will do. So I guess my question is about that. So you work at Indiana University in the Research Technologies Division. What do you research?
Oh, I don't research. I help researchers. So the particular team I'm on right now has a fancy name, but an acronym, but I won't go through all of it. But we support a product that is used by medical researchers and doctors and in the medical field to create surveys and to gather data while you're out in the field. So for example, one of the things we're working on now is the COVID data that, well, we're not working on, that we're assisting researchers with and medical personnel with is out in the testing, collecting the COVID samples and things like that. So it's a product that assists medical researchers. So this particular team, and I'm rather new to it, that's what we're doing right now, is supporting that product and supporting medical researchers. So
I guess I'm gonna ask again, what is your particular involvement with it? Are you a programmer? Are you an analyst?
Okay, so this particular product allows you to write or to have what's called extensions or add-ons. And so we write code and write the test for the code, and we generate the code to be an add-on in case other researchers want to use the additional functionality that we create. So I do, I guess for simplicity, I'll just say coding. I'm a developer.
Okay, so you're a programmer, which means that you write different kinds of programs.
Yes.
Different kinds of poems. True. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been asked this question so many times. That's why, you know, I just want us to have this little conversation about it, because I've always thought that writing programs is very much like writing poems. You have the discipline of a language, you have the form, you have, I mean, you have the indentation, you have the parentheses, you have the semicolons, you have the whole, the set of keywords, and everything has to be in its own particular place. And you have the audience, you have the computer, and you have the instant gratification of being understood and the feedback of being misunderstood, which typically means that you didn't say something right. What's your take on it?
That's a wonderful metaphor. I think it's a beautiful metaphor. It's beautiful, Katerina. Yes.
I miss writing code, I guess.
Yeah. How long have you been away from it?
Oh, too long. Long enough also. I think that the last time I did any coding was probably like 2006, something like that. But for this June, for Lexington Poetry Month, and for those listeners who don't know what Lexington Poetry Month is, they can go to lexpomo. I don't know, probably it's .com, and then see what this project is about. I did for 30 days erasures from the Linux man pages.
That's excellent. Oh my God.
That was so much fun. So,
oh, that's great. That's wonderful.
I don't know what I'm gonna do with them yet, but
the chat book. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose I could. So Nancy, so I would love to know about your NEA Fellowship. Tell us about it. About winning. Yeah.
The National Endowment of the Arts Creative Fellowship, I think a lot of writers might know this. They alternate years. 1 year it's poetry, and I think the next year it's prose. And so every other year they do poetry. And a Spalding mentor suggested that after I graduated, one way to keep publishing would be to apply for this grant, or I'm sorry, this fellowship, because it requires a certain number of poems to have been written in a certain, number of a certain time frame. You have to have had so many publications, so that keeps you from slipping and keeps you writing and things like that. And so the first year I did it, and it was, it's a $25,000 award per person. So it's one of those things you just don't think about. I just did it because it was a good discipline. And the second year, I get this phone call, but I don't answer my cell phone. I think a lot of people don't. If I don't recognize the number, I don't pick up. And it kept calling me, and then I get this email from the NEA that they would like me to call them. And I thought I had done something wrong with my application and that they were allowing me to correct it. I thought they were being, going to be kind and say, you messed up, Nancy, here, fix this. And they didn't. They said that I had actually won an award, won the fellowship. And it was surreal. I mean, I thought maybe I was being like pranked or something, but it was real. So it was a very good experience. And it also allowed me to write the second book. I was able to take time away from work. I was able to go on short retreats, short being like a week or two, nothing longer than, I couldn't take, some people take 6 weeks or a month off when or longer when they're writing a book. And since I work full time, I can't do that. So a week is generally about as long as I can go. But being in higher ed, I can take a number of weeks off during a year. And so I'm very privileged, and I understand how lucky I am to be able to do that. But it was quite an honor, and I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. And thank you.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I've always wanted to apply, but I have felt really intimidated.
Oh, well, trust me, you should not feel, Katerina, anyone listening, do not feel intimidated. No.
Yes, tell us, Nancy, we should all apply, right?
Yes, no, seriously, you should, because it's they have a whole cadre of readers. So it's not, and to make sure that they get different voices and different aesthetics in there. So it's not one particular person or one type of style. That your bio is definitely not read, because everyone reads blind. So anyway, yes, I would definitely encourage anyone who's even thinking about it, or even if you're not thinking about it, to apply. It's free. You have nothing to lose. So there you go.
And Nancy, I'm going to ask you this question that I ask all my guests who teach workshops of creative writing and creative writing classes. What is the most important thing you teach your students? If there is one thing you want them to remember from your teachings, what is it?
Okay. I don't know how useful this will be. Trust yourself.
Okay.
Yes. So if you get a lot, and I think, Katerina, you can relate to this, getting feedback is good. If you're at a position where you're confident in your work, if you get feedback too early in the creative process when you're writing, to me, in my opinion, it's detrimental. That early on, you should trust your own instincts and your own voice. And if you were to get feedback, the only kind of feedback you should get is someone applauding that you wrote something. That's my opinion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nancy. Appreciate you coming on Accents today to talk to our listeners about your new book, about your previous book, about your current creative projects, and encouraging all of us to apply to the NEA.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me, Katerina. And thank you for all that you do for the literary world. you're and generous, and we are all the better for it. So thank you.
Thank you.